Rain poured over the narrow, cracked roof of the old orphanage as Lila pressed her trembling hands together. She had lived there since she was 5, since the night fire took everything she loved. Now, at 21, the world outside the iron gates still felt cruel and cold. When the headmistress called her into the office that morning, Lila expected another lecture about unpaid dues. But instead, the old woman's eyes were sharp and distant. "There's a man," she said, her voice uneasy. "He came asking for a wife. Someone quiet, obedient. He'll pay handsomely." Lila's heart froze. "A wife?" "He's an ex-convict," the headmistress continued, refusing to meet her eyes. "But he's offering enough to save this orphanage. Think of the children." And just like that, Lila's life was sold to a stranger's promise. The next day, a black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of the orphanage gates. A tall man stepped out, broad shoulders under a dark coat, jaw lined with faint scars, eyes cold as winter. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just looked at Lila once and said in a deep voice, "Get in." The ride was silent. Every few seconds, Lila dared to glance at him. There was something strange about the man, his posture too refined, his scent too expensive for someone recently out of prison. Still, his gaze carried danger. When they arrived at his secluded estate outside the city, she felt a chill. The mansion stood like a sleeping beast, grand, but guarded by shadows. Inside, everything gleamed, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a piano that hadn't been played in years. "Your room is upstairs," he said curtly. "You'll find clothes inside. Don't go into the west wing." And then he disappeared behind a heavy oak door. For weeks, silence ruled the mansion. He left early, returned late. Sometimes, Lila would hear his footsteps echo down the hall, or see him staring out the window as if haunted by something unseen. She learned his name, **Damien Cross, **. Once, she overheard two of the staff whispering. "They say he killed a man," one said. "Some say he was framed," the other whispered. "But he came out of prison and bought this entire company out of nowhere." Company? That word lingered. One evening, unable to suppress her curiosity, Lila followed him. The west wing was dark, but through the half-open door, she saw him seated before a wall of glowing monitors, stock charts, business reports, boardroom meetings streamed live. On one screen, she caught sight of a company logo, Cross Enterprises, one of the nation's largest conglomerates. Her breath hitched. Damien Cross wasn't just an ex-convict. He was a billionaire, one who lived behind locked doors, pretending to be a ghost. But why? The next morning, she found him sitting in the garden, cigarette smoke curling around his face. For the first time, he looked human. Broken. "You shouldn't have gone there," he said without looking at her. "I just wanted to know who I married," she replied softly. His gaze lifted to hers, sharp, unreadable. "You married a man you should fear. Then why do you hide behind lies?" she whispered. "Why pretend to be something you're not?" He dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his boot. "Because the truth can destroy more than lies ever could." For the first time, she saw the shadow in his eyes, the weight of guilt, the pain of betrayal. She didn't know yet that Damien Cross had once been the most powerful CEO in the city, until his own brother framed him for a murder he didn't commit. And now, he was out, not for redemption, but for revenge. That night, as Lila wandered the empty halls, she found a hidden photograph tucked inside a book on his desk. It was of Damien, smiling beside another man who looked strikingly similar, his brother, Ethan Cross. The caption read, *Cross Brothers, the future of Empire Industries. She realized then that her marriage was not an accident. She was part of something much darker, something planned. And as thunder rumbled outside, Damien appeared in the doorway, his voice low and heavy. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said. "Now, you're in this with me." Lila stepped back, her pulse racing. In what? He met her eyes, and for the first time, there was no mask, no pretense. In a war, he said, his voice almost a whisper. A war for everything that was stolen from me. But what neither of them knew, was that Ethan Cross already knew Damien was alive. And he was coming for both of them. The night turned heavy with silence, broken only by the soft hum of rain against the mansion windows. Lila stood frozen, her heart thundering in her chest as Damien's words echoed inside her head, a war for everything that was stolen from me, His face was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that came from years of pain buried beneath control. He took a step closer, and she caught the faint scent of rain and smoke clinging to his coat. I need you to listen carefully, he said, his tone quieter now. From this moment, nothing you see or hear leaves this house. Not a word to anyone. Not even the staff. Lila nodded, unsure if it was fear or instinct that made her obey. Ethan knows I'm alive, Damien continued, pacing the room. He's been looking for me since the day I walked out of prison. The man you see in the news, smiling, generous, respected, that's the mask of a monster. Lila frowned. You mean your brother? A bitter smile touched his lips. My brother killed our father. And when I tried to expose him, he made sure the world believed I did it. The revelation hit her like ice water. He framed you. Damien's jaw tightened. Every document. Every witness. Every trace of truth erased by money and power. I had no chance. 5 years in prison taught me one thing, Lila, innocence doesn't protect you when evil wears a tailored suit. He turned to face her fully. That's why I came back. Not for pity. Not for forgiveness. For justice. Lila's throat went dry. She had spent her life wishing for someone to see her, to value her. And yet here she was, standing before a man who carried the weight of betrayal and power, and for the first time, she felt seen. Still, one question burned in her mind. Then why me? Why did you marry me? He paused. The air grew thick between them. His gaze softened slightly, and he exhaled as though the answer hurt to admit. Because Ethan was looking for me through business channels. I needed a life that didn't exist in his world, a quiet marriage, a normal home, something untraceable. You were perfect for that. Her chest tightened. So, I was just a cover. Damien looked away. At first. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any lie could have. Lila blinked hard, fighting the sting behind her eyes. At first, he repeated, but things don't always stay the way they begin. She didn't know what that meant, but something in his eyes, the way he lingered when he looked at her, the way his tone softened when he spoke her name, told her there was more. Something unspoken. Before she could respond, the sound of glass shattering echoed through the hall. Damien's head snapped toward the door, all emotion vanishing from his face. He moved swiftly, pulling a sleek gun from a drawer in the side table. Stay here, he ordered. Damien, wait. He was already gone. Lila's heart raced as she crept toward the door, peeking through the small gap. 2 figures dressed in black stormed through the foyer, their faces covered. Damien moved like a shadow, precise, lethal, trained. Within seconds, one intruder was disarmed, the other pinned against the wall. But before Damien could finish, the second man threw a small metal device on the ground. Smoke exploded across the hall. Lila coughed, stumbling backward as the acrid scent burned her eyes. Lila. Damien's voice thundered through the haze. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her to safety. She gasped as the smoke cleared and found herself pressed against his chest, his hand firm behind her head. They weren't thieves, he muttered. They were sent to warn me. By your brother, she whispered. By the man who calls himself my brother. His tone was cold again. He's testing how close he can get. As he spoke, the estate's security lights flickered back on, revealing the mess. Broken glass, overturned furniture, a single envelope left on the floor. Damien picked it up, his expression darkening as he read the message inside. "You can't hide behind a girl forever, Damien." He crushed the paper in his hand. Lila shivered, the words echoing inside her mind. "He knows about me." "Yes," Damien said grimly. "And that means you're no longer just my cover, you're my weakness." Her breath hitched. "So what happens now?" He looked at her, eyes burning with determination. "Now, we fight back." The next morning, the mansion felt different, alive, tense, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Damien called a few men into his study, men in sharp suits, their faces unreadable. From the bits of conversation Lila caught through the door, they were former board members of Cross Enterprises, loyal to Damien before Ethan bought their silence. "We'll rebuild from the shadows," one of them said. Slowly, carefully. "But Ethan has connections everywhere." "Then we take away his connections," Damien replied. "Piece by piece." Lila stood outside, listening, torn between fear and fascination. She had never imagined her quiet life would twist into a web of power, revenge, and secrets. That evening, as the men left and the mansion quieted again, Damien found her sitting in the garden, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. "You heard," he said softly. She nodded. "You're going after him." "I have to," he replied. "He took everything. My company, my reputation, my freedom. If I don't end this, he'll never stop." Lila turned to him, eyes full of questions. "And if you lose?" He hesitated for the first time. "Then I lose everything I've built since walking out of that cell." Something in his voice cracked then, something human. Lila reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Then don't face him alone." He stared at her, caught off guard. "You have no idea what you're offering, Lila." "Maybe not," she said quietly, "but I know what it's like to have nothing. And I know what it means to fight for something that finally feels real." He didn't respond, but his silence said more than words could. Days passed, each filled with quiet tension. Damien spent hours locked in his study, making calls, meeting contacts, plotting in secrecy. At night, Lila would catch glimpses of him standing on the balcony, his expression distant, haunted. One night, she brought him coffee, setting it gently beside his papers. "You should rest," she murmured. He looked up, eyes tired. "Rest doesn't exist for people like me." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it should." For the briefest second, he almost smiled. And when their eyes met, something unspoken sparked between them, a fragile understanding that neither of them could name. But peace never lasts long in a house built on secrets. That same night, Damien received a call. The voice on the other end was cold, familiar, dripping with venom. "Hello, brother." Lila froze at the sound. Damien didn't answer immediately, his jaw tightening. "I see you're enjoying your little game," Ethan continued, his tone almost playful. "Hiding behind walls, pretending to be dead. Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" "What do you want, Ethan?" Damien said evenly. "Oh, I already have what I want," Ethan replied. "But you have something I'm curious about. That girl, your lovely little wife. She's quite the distraction, isn't she?" Damien's grip on the phone turned white-knuckled. "If you touch her." Ethan laughed. "Touch her? I don't have to. You'll destroy her yourself once she learns the truth." The line went dead. Lila stepped forward, trembling. What did he mean? Damien turned slowly, the weight of 1,000 secrets in his eyes. "He's lying," he said too quickly. But Lila heard what he didn't say. That somewhere in Damien's past lay a truth darker than even his brother's betrayal. And it was a truth that might destroy them both. The storm outside seemed to echo the storm inside her heart. The rain lashed against the windows, lightning illuminating Damien's face in sharp, ghostly flashes. Lila stood still, her voice trembling. What truth was he talking about, Damien? He said nothing, only turned away, his shoulders tense. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. Tell me, she insisted, stepping closer. You said he framed you, you said you were innocent, so what is he holding over you? Damien closed his eyes, as if every breath hurt. Some truths, he said slowly, don't clear your name. They only stain it deeper. Then let me decide that, she whispered. He turned to face her, his voice low. The night my father died, I was there. I confronted Ethan about his deals. He was stealing company funds, using the business to launder money. Our father found out. They fought, and he paused, his throat tightening. I tried to stop him, Lila. But he pushed our father, he fell. Her heart stopped. I called for help, but Ethan was faster. By the time the police came, the story was written. The cameras showed me covered in blood, holding our father's body. Ethan walked out the front door free. Lila's eyes filled with tears. So it was an accident? Yes, Damien said bitterly. But accidents don't matter when lies are louder than truth. The weight of his words sank into her chest. He wasn't a murderer, but he was a man carved by guilt and shadows. She stepped forward and placed her hand gently against his cheek. You're not what he says you are. His breath caught. You don't know what I've done since then. I don't care, she said softly. Because what I see now is a man who's been punished enough. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. Then, the lights flickered. A loud crash echoed through the hall. Damien's head snapped up instantly. He's here, he muttered, his voice turning cold and sharp. Before Lila could ask, the front doors burst open. Men in dark suits flooded in, weapons drawn. At their center stood Ethan Cross, immaculately dressed, smirking, his eyes gleaming like a predator. Little brother, he said, spreading his arms. You didn't think you could hide forever, did you? Damien stepped forward, shielding Lila. You shouldn't have come here. Oh, but I had to, Ethan replied casually. You stole something from me, my company, my legacy, and now, his gaze shifted toward Lila, slow and deliberate. My entertainment. Lila's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. This ends tonight, Damien growled. Ethan laughed softly. Still dramatic, aren't you? Tell me, what's your plan? Another noble speech about justice? Or perhaps you'll shoot me like you should have years ago. I don't kill family, Damien said. Ethan tilted his head. Pity. I don't have that weakness. With a flick of his wrist, two of his men lunged forward. Damien moved fast, grabbing Lila, ducking behind the marble column as bullets tore through the walls. The house that once felt like a cage now felt like a battlefield. Stay down, he shouted, returning fire. But Ethan's men were many, and they advanced like a wave. Damien was fierce, precise, but the odds were brutal. A bullet grazed his arm, he gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. Damien! Lila cried, crawling toward him. He grabbed her hand, pulling her close. You have to get out. Through the east door, there's a car waiting. I'm not leaving you, she shouted over the chaos. Lila, please, he said, eyes fierce. If he gets to you, he wins. But before she could answer, Ethan's voice rang out. Touching, really. Love suits you, brother. Too bad it makes you weak. Lila turned and saw Ethan holding a gun, aimed straight at Damien. No, she screamed, throwing herself forward. The shot fired, loud, shattering the silence. Damien caught her as she fell, her body trembling. But it wasn't her blood. It was his. He looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his shirt, then up at her tear-streaked face. "Lila," he whispered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Looks like I broke my promise. I said you'd be safe." "Don't you dare say that," she cried, pressing her hands against the wound. "You can't leave me, do you hear me? You can't." Behind them, Ethan approached slowly, gun still in hand. "It's poetic, really. You take my company, I take your life." Balance restored. But Lila's eyes burned with fury. She turned, her voice trembling but sharp as glass. "You think killing him makes you powerful? You'll never be half the man he is." Ethan laughed. "And you'll soon be a widow." Before he could fire again, Damien's hand shot out, grabbing the fallen gun beside him. With a final burst of strength, he pulled the trigger. The shot hit Ethan square in the chest. His expression froze in shock as he stumbled backward, collapsing onto the marble floor. For a long moment, there was only silence. The gun slipped from Damien's hand. Lila caught him before he fell completely, tears blurring her vision. "You did it," she whispered. "It's over." He smiled faintly, eyes dimming. "Over, for him, maybe." His fingers brushed her cheek. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't live in my shadows," he said softly. "Build something new. Something that doesn't end with me." "No," she choked out. "We can get help, please, just hold on." He smiled again, weaker this time. "You were the only thing I didn't plan for, Lila." And then, his hand fell. Her scream echoed through the empty halls, carried away by the storm. Hours later, the police arrived. The mansion was silent, save for the rain dripping through broken glass. Ethan Cross was pronounced dead on the scene. Damien's name was cleared, evidence found in Ethan's possession revealed the truth behind his father's murder and the years of deceit. But none of that mattered to Lila. Not the flashing lights, not the officers' voices, not the whispers of reporters. She sat beside Damien's still body, her fingers tracing the scar on his hand. The days that followed were a blur. The world called him a hero, a fallen CEO who'd exposed corruption. His story was splashed across headlines, his empire restored in his name. But for Lila, it wasn't victory. It was silence. Until one morning, weeks later, she received a letter delivered by a man in a black suit. The handwriting was unmistakably his, steady, bold, elegant. Asterisk: if you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. I told you once that truth destroys more than lies ever could. But you were the truth I wanted to keep. The company, the fortune, the name, they mean nothing without you. So whatever you build next, Lila, build it as you. Not as the wife of a ghost, asterisk. Her tears fell onto the paper, blurring the ink. Inside the envelope was a single key, the key to the west wing of the mansion. When she opened it, she found something she'd never seen before, a room full of canvases. Portraits, hundreds of them, all painted by Damien. Each one captured fragments of her, her laughter, her quiet sadness, the way she'd once looked out the window at dawn. He had painted her before she ever knew he loved her. Lila sank to her knees, surrounded by memories, the weight of his love filling every corner of the room. Outside, the storm had finally stopped. The morning light poured through the windows, soft and golden, touching every painting like a final blessing. She smiled through her tears. "You're still here," she whispered. And somewhere, in the quiet that followed, it felt as if he was. Years later, the world would know her name, not as the orphan who married a convict, but as Lila Cross, the woman who rebuilt an empire not through revenge, but through hope. She turned Damien's estate into a foundation for children like her, a place where no one would ever be sold for survival again. And sometimes, when the rain fell just right against the windows, she could almost hear his voice in the distance, calm, deep, and certain. Asterisk, you were never my cover, Lila. You were my redemption. Asterisk.